Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It's actually a palindrome month. It's like, well, for the first 9 days, it's 12/5/21. I feel good about this. We haven't had a good palindrome day in a while. I can't even think of the last one.
Can't really either.
Like, oh no, there's the whole one January 20 through 29 sequence. That would have worked too.
Oh right, yeah.
Wow, it's been like
a longer one.
Yeah, it's been like a year since we've had practically a year since we've had a good palindrome day. This does not bode well for the future. So this is one of those things that's kind of been on my mind for the past couple of weeks now. So that kid in Wisconsin shot 3 people, killed 2 of them, and was acquitted. And it was self-defense. And the state dropped charges of possession of an illegal firearm and stuff like that. And justice was served. And then here, not too long ago, some kid went to school and shot up the place and killed 4 people. And his parents are being charged with this as like accessory to manslaughter because they bought him the firearm like a few days before he shot the place up. And then he was posting on social media about it. They did too. And apparently they got called into the office the day of, and they didn't like pull him out of school. They didn't check him. They didn't look for the firearm. And then apparently the kid's mom like texts him later, just like 30 minutes later, don't do it. And they went on the lam. They ran off, like pulled out a bunch of cash from their bank accounts and tried to hide out in a fucking warehouse in Detroit.
How are their bank accounts not frozen? First off,
yeah,
because it's like we have a surveillance state until 2 white people are on the run, and then suddenly they can't find shit. They can't shut down bank accounts. Like if I spend an extra $30 on accident, my bank account, oh, you can't use your card. Sorry. These motherfuckers are on the run from the law, can pull out $4,000 between, because I know there's like a $2,000 limit on ATMs or on accounts, because it might not even be ATMs. I can't even pull out more than $600 a day.
I think it's like $500 or $600 from an ATM machine in a 24-hour period, and then like from a physical location, you can pull out as much as $2,000.
But you're not white enough, bro. You're not white enough. Apparently,
I can't pull out. I know I can't pull $2,000 out of an ATM machine.
Apparently, white people can pull out $2,000 at a time, and that's why I'm like, what type of like special account do these people have to be able to pull out $2,000 per person at a time when they're on the fucking run? This is after they're on the run, yeah. And their bank accounts aren't frozen. How? And this is where I'm like, oh, we got a surveillance state for non-white people. If you're not white, it's a surveillance state. For white people, you can be on the run from the fucking law and go to a fucking bank and just pull out money. The only reason they even got caught is because somebody finally called on them. That's the only reason they even got caught.
Well, I thought it was kind of clever to go to a warehouse in Detroit where there's likely very poor, if zero, cell phone service.
Man, and this is where, again, it's like, okay, the city that shit happened in was closer to Flint than to Detroit. But anytime the media is talking about it, shooting 45 miles north of Detroit, hold up. hold up, because it's 30 miles east of fucking Flint. So why aren't we talking about this is 30 miles east of Flint? Why are we trying to associate this shooting with Detroit media? First off, because that's where I'm like, first off, these 3 lone wolves are all acting independently, and it's all mental health issues. And it's crazy they finally got charged with terrorism. And the only reason they got charged with terrorism, it seems, is because there was active intent that the school called the parents on, that the parents justified and apparently helped it seems as if the parents were the one that kept diffusing the situation. And then the fucking cops, I don't intuitively, this is not an exaggeration. This motherfucker literally said, I don't intuitively feel that these people are flight risks before they didn't put them under surveillance immediately. So before these people were declared as part of the culpability, the fucking police force, I just intuitively, my intuition just tells me that these are good folks. These are good white Christian people that aren't going to run from the law. Sure enough, these motherfuckers run, and they can't fucking find them for like damn near a day, which is like as much surveillance as this state has instituted, and we all know that the surveillance is there while they're trying to like figure out ways to start getting more reports if you have a $600 transaction. Meanwhile, these motherfuckers can just pull out $2,000 even while they're actively identified as fugitives from the law. Their bank accounts were not frozen. Not frozen.
Yep.
If our state actually cared about catching criminals the way that it's set up, yeah, like within our household, our bank accounts have been frozen by people trying to get money who don't fucking deserve it, where they're like, oh, I'm going to sue you to get money that you supposedly owe. And then, of course, they don't get the fucking money because it's not actually theirs, but they're able to get our bank accounts frozen by filing lawsuits and shit, where it's like, you mean to tell me these people are literally being charged with terrorism and they can go just pull out $2,000? Seriously? Because I've seen Operation Chokehold or Choke Point, where fucking anybody who was in the porn industry in America, I'm not talking about anywhere else. This is America. People, this is like not long ago, like early 2010s. If you were involved in the porn industry, the banks were freezing the banks would freeze your accounts.
I think the same thing happened in the cannabis industry in the early phase.
It was part of the same. It was part of the same push. Okay. Operation Choke Point. Yeah. They were freezing anybody who was associated with cannabis, or if you were associated with the porn industry, or anything that they deemed morally unfit. It was some bullshit about morals. I'm talking about the motherfuckers sitting up in Congress bombing people, sending out other American kids to die, to kill other people. They're running a moral fucking bank account freezing run. You mean the same motherfuckers that got caught like dumping stocks before fucking COVID? These motherfuckers are trying to run moral campaigns and freeze porn stars and cannabis dealers' bank accounts. This is America, because this is where I see the way that other countries are demonized constantly. Like, this is something that happened in Cuba. No, this is some American ass shit. This is some traditionally American oppression. Anytime people like, this is communist. No, this is American oppression. This is like quintessential American oppression with a little bit of British influence. Because this is where every time anything bad happens in this country, it's just like over in those fucking Arab countries. No, this is some traditional American oppression. And this is where I'm like, the more I start to understand how my existence is like it's trivialized, and I, as an individual, there are all these things, all these obstacles put up in my way to make it so I'll never actually be able to get to a certain point. Whereas if you're white, there are things just handed to you, because then you're like, oh, well, you're just racist. No, actually, I have fucking science to back me up. On the subsidies that were given out to farmers after COVID-19 relief, it was like 99% went to fucking white farmers. 99%. And the only reason it wasn't 100% is because they had just enough. It was like 0.01% went to black farmers, and like just enough went to like a few native farmers, a few black farmers, a few Mexican farmers, that they can say it wasn't 100%. It was like 99.99%. It was not even just 99%. It was like closer to 100% than 99% if you really look at it. So this is where the subsidies that the government was supposed to be giving to quote unquote American citizens or American farmers were only going to actual white farmers. And then you find out that like the way that the government subsidies have been going to farmers for the past 30 years have been disproportionately written so that black farmers not only can't get them, but they're losing land while white farmers are getting paid to throw away crops. Like black farmers are not getting the same subsidies. So while white farmers are getting paid to fucking literally throw away fucking crops to expand their farms, black farmers are losing their properties because they can't compete with white farmers who get paid to throw away shit when they don't have any sort of assistance from the banks. They can't get loans. They can't get USDA approved loans, or it's not even the loans. White farmers are getting grants from the USDA, and black farmers aren't even like, there were black farmers that were told directly, your white counterparts are going to have to get the money before we can see if we can have some for you niggers. This is what they were actively being told by the banks after going so many times. So it's like the way people have this notion of what's possible is because white people are just literally given shit. I have a friend who has land, and the government just gave him fucking 20 grand to build a greenhouse. And I'm like, well, that's fucking awesome. But black people can't get that shit. Black people can't get anything like that. So when like white people turn around and try to throw it in black people's faces, it's like so many levels of removed from reality, because these people, but they do understand. They just pretend they don't understand. That's the issue, is like they want to turn around. This is communist behavior. Well, give me my subsidy, but don't give it to those niggers over there, because that's communism. It's communism if everybody gets it, but if white people get it, that's just America. So there's this element of they know what the fuck they're doing, and they know what they this white welfare state that they have created, while then shouting down communism or shouting down socialism while completely benefiting from those type of policies and practices. They know what the fuck they're doing. The middle centrist liberal left just doesn't actually listen to minorities enough to get on board. And this is where the left, it's the centrist, self-proclaimed liberal left that use minority plight as voting ammunition. And this is where I'm like, the right wing is fucking racist and horrible, but the left in America is not much better because they think that they are better, And by proxy, they end up using minority plight just as a means to get political backing, but never actually do anything about it because they don't actually fucking care about black people. They don't see black people as actually being equal. And this is why the problem is they just can't admit it. There's a bunch of people who want to help. Like anytime I hear somebody, I want to go help Africans. You go help some fucking white Americans first. Keep your fucking help and help some white Americans in Appalachia before you take your fucking ass over to Africa, your funky ass over to Africa, trying to help some people. You don't even know a fucking country over there. You just treat it as a fucking unified country as if there's not 54 different fucking countries over there. I'm going to go help people in Africa. Well, which fucking country, motherfucker? Figure that shit out. And first, figure that shit out before you take your funky ass over there trying to do some goddamn fucking shit you'd have no business doing. There's people who feel like they can give charity to this fucking hypothetical African in poverty because they don't want to address the fact that they're fucking living in a shithole country themselves. It's this idea that if I can create this, I'll just come up with some fucking poor African in my mind and all this shit that I used to see on TV. Meanwhile, there's like more young people on the African continent than there are Americans, period. So that continent is thriving if we're going to look at it as a fucking continent compared to America that's falling apart and aging and just mentally stagnating. Africa is like, we can't even, if we're going to look at it as a continent, we shouldn't even put those two in the same fucking sentence because Africa is so far beyond America where as far as long-term survival goes, they're on the population upswing as a continent. Meanwhile, America's dying and aging by the science.
So I just pulled up states ranked by education. And the dumbest state is New Mexico.
The dumbest state.
The next dumbest state, Alaska.
Oh, my God.
Louisiana, Alabama, Arizona, West Virginia, which is commonly believed to be the dumbest state, but it's in fact not the dumbest state, South Carolina, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and finally Arkansas at 41.
Jeez.
I feel like crazy. I feel like all these states have something in common.
Yep. We don't have to say it. We don't have to say it. Everybody can figure that out.
I mean, Alaska might be the only outlier, but not really.
Not really.
No, not really at all.
No.
And I think only by virtue of retirement community and starting out as not America are Texas and Florida. But Texas actually seems to produce a lot. And Florida, man, apparently they can afford their own militia. So... I did learn that Florida is not the only state to have a special state militia, state armed service. Not California, New York, and a couple of Western states. I think there's like 10 or 11. It just seems like, you know, an interesting way for the state to have its own organized branch of, or a group to communicate with military operations like search and rescue operations. So in a place like California or Colorado or Florida, where there are vast swaths of undeveloped land that are potentially hazardous, that kind of makes sense. Texas is just Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, so... But yeah, that list is pretty interesting to me because it's a bunch of southern states that are also currently experiencing, you know, the post-Thanksgiving wave of pandemic. Although it seems like some of the places in the South, like the places that were hit really hard with Delta over the summer, it's like their numbers have been kind of stabilizing. Not going up or going down, but stabilizing.
I think what we're seeing is the death of a specific culture.
Yeah.
And obviously, when things die, they do not die quietly; they die loudly. And I think it feels dire because we're watching this animal just flail and try to, like, it's lashing out. It ends up in shootings. It ends up in threats. It ends up in internet trolling that is just the most vile shit. And because the government had been so laden with that culture, it let it go for a long time. But now too many white people are dying. That culture is killing too many white people, and they can't let that go any longer. So it's like, ultimately, once white people start dying because of that culture, that's when they have to start doing something about it. And we've hit that point because it's like, in the white flight and getting away from black and brown communities, well, guess what? Now you got to travel like 300 miles if you want to go kill some black people. So nobody who's racist and murderous is going to travel 300 miles because they've moved so far away from black people. And then that shit ends up lashing out at white people. And this is where now they have to do something about that shit because white people are dying because of that anger, that vitriol that has been harnessed, and the seeds have been sown to go against brown people and black people, but they've moved so far away that it's literally like you'd have to stage a fucking military campaign to actually get around enough black people for them to do that shit. So then these lazy fucking murderous bastards end up lashing out at white people because that's the only people that are around them. And it's like, you see it over and over, and white people were like, oh, what's happening? Oh, what's happening? Now, guess what? Parents are being charged with terrorism because it was terrorism the whole fucking time. It was terrorism the whole fucking time. That meme, it always was.
Just the other day, like yesterday, a dude shot his neighbor. His neighbor happened to be black, and he claims self-defense. The rest of the people in the neighborhood who watched it say it wasn't self-defense, but you know, this is going to have its day in court too.
I mean, it's like the fucking bastards who shot Ahmaud Arbery. The cops were like, "Oh, let me clean you off, sir. We don't want you to have any blood on you or anything. Let me make sure you're okay." They were like trying to help the fucking shooters before Ahmaud Arbery. So this is where, yeah, of course, this is what this country was set up for. But there's not like the whole defund the police mantra. It got a lot of pushback because the police are the force to uphold that shit. And this is where I love that in the middle of a pandemic, we have to shut down imperialism abroad. And then they start imperialism at home, which is where I'm like, well, this is the fucking snake eating its own tail at this point. And this is kind of like, this is only a matter of time before this shit is over because they have no capacity to go do this shit to brown and black people anymore. So they got to start doing it to other white people. And that's exactly what the fuck is happening. So it's like,
well, we can't send our imperialist forces abroad where they're going to get COVID because they don't, you know, those are unvaccinated populations that we would putting our stormtroopers at risk by, you know, to exposure.
The motherfuckers in the military are all right-wing nuts in most parts. So of course they're not vaccinated. You put a bunch of unvaccinated people on a fucking submarine together. Guess what the fuck is going to happen? That's why our military's back.
They're going to be looking for a zombie submarine. Holy shit.
They're trying to, we we're cutting. Well, they're not even really cutting funding. They're just relocating the military. No, you got too many motherfuckers with COVID, and you can't say it out loud. Is what happened. Our military probably lost 50% of its active force from COVID. Guess what? Long COVID effects. You think these motherfuckers are coming back and coming back in shape? Oof. No, our military just got hit from COVID, and they're trying to act like that shit didn't happen.
Somewhere out there, there's a sardine can full of submarine service people, seamen, and they're like, they've got the shits because COVID diarrhea is a thing. They've all got COVID foot. They've all got COVID hands.
This is where.
At least they're in like a pressurized
shit, bro.
They're basically in a bariatric pressure chamber though, so it's probably okay.
I mean, it's probably worse.
Oh man,
if anything,
that's like
because there's way more nitrogen in their blood when they're at like pressure. So it's like the things that are associated with breathing are going to be made worse by like 3 atmospheric pressures or 4 atmospheric pressures or whatever it is. It's going to be 4 times as hard to breathe down there.
So
your blood oxygen concentration is going to be way off.
Our small fast attack submarines have a crew of somewhere in the 120 to 134 range, and our largest submarines apparently have a crew of 160 people. And so I'm just thinking, that's a lot of farts and just sickness to contain. At some point, there's going to be a fucking like zombie submarine out there that's like just chilling on the bottom of the ocean because everyone died.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not already, there's got to be a few already, just by the numbers, you know.
I'm not talking about like American specifically. I'm just saying submarines in the oceans of the world. There are enough submarines in the world that surely at least one of them has like fallen victim to the fucking pandemic, and they're just gone.
Like, I mean, over time, I'm imagining because I think it was like, well, in America, but I think the Chinese had submarines in like the 1700s, if I'm not mistaken, 17 or 1800s. And they definitely started having wooden submarines in America in like the late 1800s. Yeah. So that's where submarines aren't new, but the ones that we think of in the sense of like the big ones, there's just been so many that it's almost impossible that scenario hasn't happened over time.
Yeah.
Like, at least a few times probably, and they just don't talk about them because it's got to be embarrassing. Oh yeah, we lost an entire crew. We have no idea where they are. We have no idea where the submarine is. We don't know what happened, but it's because everybody died from like some sort of plague or some shit, and that's where.
Yeah, like one person brings cholera on board.
Right. Yeah.
They're all fucked. Like they did not make it on the Oregon Trail.
Once again, I'm sure there's probably records on Wikipedia or some shit, but nobody publicizes that because it's like an embarrassment of massive proportions.
Yeah, because big submarines aren't cheap. They're huge.
No.
And they're self-contained, but they're like not tiny at all. These are gigantic boats, like the portions that we see like above water. That's like it's the same thing with icebergs.
A lot of them are nuclear powered now, or have been for a while, which is where, they're just basically nuclear reactors floating around.
Well, what's crazy cool is they've I think the newest ones use like magnets. They use dynamos to turn the impellers. They're not even using like a drive shaft anymore. So there's like the moving parts have been reduced even further. Like the noises they make are mechanical from people walking in them, apparently, or hatches opening or closing, latches sealing things up, repressurizing.
Well, it's crazy. Like, I'm not gonna act like I know everything about nuclear power or anything like that.
Oh man, I only know what I read about these things. This stuff's still like a closely guarded secret as far as I'm concerned.
But nuclear power is basically like just steam.
Yeah.
And when you really break it down, it's just a big fucking steam engine. Obviously that's really simplifying it, but if you like really get into it, that's kind of what it is at the core. So it's like the materials have changed, but the methods of energy extraction have not really changed all that much. Because a lot of them were already really good. So there's only so efficient you can make certain things, but that's where we've gotten to the point where it's like being able to go past 100% efficiency is the key to getting to basically type 1 civilization. And that's kind of where we're like really close, but
Wasn't
getting
there like
over that hump is
wasn't
like
there like a photovoltaic array that was released like last year or a year before that they were able to achieve like over 100% efficiency?
yeah, there's been a few. It's
But they're
just
like
a matter
really
of
delicate.
Yeah, they're really delicate. The parts have to be upkept. So it's not at a point where it's like actually a net positive. So it's a net positive for the electricity, but the actual net positive for the total resource exchange is not yet there because of like capitalism, basically.
Well, I mean, my understanding is we wouldn't be able to manufacture them cheap enough to maintain.
That's the issue. That's the issue is the notion of cheap. It's like
We can't.
The
get
issue
cost
is
down.
that
it's just
it's not about the cost so much as like if the earth dies, it doesn't matter if they were cheap or expensive.
Yeah.
Like the issue is that we're looking at things in terms of like monetary cost when there's actually a survival cost that is more important than the monetary cost. And the survival cost is not being weighed into the capitalist equation. And that's the problem. Like the fact that it's cheaper or it needs to be cheaper is a problem in itself. Like it shouldn't even matter. We need to get to more than 100% efficiency for the sake of the
Survival.
species' long-term survival. Exactly.
So this is
That's
one of
the
those
impetus, not to get it cheap.
So this is one of those moments where I'm reminded of like Star Trek, where every place the Federation goes, everyone seems to live in some kind of modest but very comfortable and very sophisticated dwelling of some sort. And sometimes they look like they are reflecting local culture, but at the core, there's a very vast and powerful computer system that connects all of these things to each other. And people have jobs. They don't seem to want things because they can just replicate the things they need if they need something. And it's not like anyone's out there that's actually inventing something new. There are still artists, but artists are rewarded by their, participation in the great. It doesn't even, there's like only a few cultures in all of Star Trek that have like economic systems that they even worry about. And the only one they really describe in depth is like the Ferengi economic culture. But that's just like going to Las Vegas.
Ferengi never produced anything of use.
No, they produced gambling.
I mean, and they didn't even produce that. They just
capitalized
facilitate it. Because if you really look at it, all the people are gambling themselves. Like the Dabo tables, like they're just facilitating that. They didn't even really produce.
Yeah.
And this, I don't even think that's a Ferengi game, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like they take games from other cultures and have people betting. So that I think the Ferengi are even more extreme in that example, in that like, their ships aren't great, their technology is not great.
They just buy anything they need.
Because everybody in the universe still, which the whole Latinum thing is still super weird in that I feel as if I'm starting to wonder if it's possible for someone who's raised in a capitalist environment or culture to ever actually conceive of anything that's detached from capitalism at some point.
So in
It
Star Trek,
seems like it's impossible.
in Star Trek, latinum is
now.
really only used to purchase, like trinkets or collectible items or art. It's a self-contained exchange universe where it's valued for itself. It can be gained by doing, jobs. But that latinum really doesn't go back into any other economic system other than, things that people will actually do for latinum. And most people don't need latinum because they have a replicator.
That's true in theory, but then when they apply it, you see that they end up needing, like, there's no Star Trek universe in which latinum is not used for something that is actually needed at one point.
Yeah.
And every Star Trek universe engages in bartering at some point where I'm like, then you haven't become fully self-sufficient. So there's always like the notion that they're self-sufficient, but they always end up needing something from somebody else. And that's the impetus for the episode or the impetus for the story. So it's like, no, you haven't actually gotten out of this framework. So it's like things like that, which they claim to be one way, but the story still needs those things to move forward. It's like you actually haven't gotten out of a capitalist mindset, and the need, like the notion of something being rare or needed.
Oh, it's only
is
rare
still
because
a
it can't
major-
be replicated.
That's what I'm saying. That's still a major part of these stories,
Yeah.
which is just capitalism seeping back into the storyline. So it's like at the end of the day, they're like, well, the universe is vast, but there's still rarity in lithium or trilithium or dilithium or something. You're going to need to trade for something in the future. It doesn't matter if it's the 24th or the 27th century. You still got to trade and have some latinum because
it's so
rarity
messed up because
exists.
I would still rather have a functional replicator than any amount of latinum because I'm pretty sure a replicator, as long as it's working, can make
But you just need somebody to fix it if you don't know how. And this is like, that's the shit.
Well,
that
I will
kept
replicate
producing
the
cat
fucking.
food.
I'll replicate the tools and the owner's manual, and I will read the fucking manual.
But if you can't do that, if your replicator keeps spitting out cat food when you ask for a wrench, and
Yeah.
that was literally one of the storylines where it's like everything kept tasting like cat food, and like they needed to get the replicator fixed. So Quark kept sneaking up to the captain's replicator or some shit. Oh wait, commander, because I don't think he was able to be captain yet because he was black. Anyway, he kept sneaking up there because his replicator couldn't get fixed, and there's only one Chief O'Brien because there's rarity. There's manufactured rarity.
Because there's
So
only
if
one
there's
Irish guy you can
chief,
turn a wrench on.
only one white guy can fix everything. So you got to wait for that white guy to come give you attention. Otherwise, you're going to have to eat cat food. The end. And that's the moral of the story in the 25th century, that you got to wait for a white guy to come give you attention if you don't want to eat cat food. That's a real episode.
He's not even an officer. He's a chief.
Yeah. So that's where I'm like, man, the way that
Because
they want to put themselves in the future, but then that shit seeps right back in.
Part of the character design of O'Brien was that he was a working man, and that's why he rolled his sleeves up.
A working man with a Japanese wife.
He was a botanist.
Yeah.
So
This is like,
in the Star Trek game that I've been playing, there's a sequence of missions that if you don't have a botanist, you're fucked. Like you just can't even run them. Go figure. Got to have a botanist
Yeah.
in the future.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But she gets reduced to this. She's just a basic mom character who the character's annoying as fuck because of the way they wrote her.
Keiko.
So then she just becomes this like piece, like a trophy dumb. She's a really smart, dumb trophy wife for Chief O'Brien. And that's where it's like,
Well, she's a civilian. She's not Starfleet.
I know, but they made many storylines about her.
Yeah.
So then that's why you end up like, not you, but the audience ends up not liking her because we spend fucking hours seeing her teaching kids in a fucking classroom, infantilizing her, not meanwhile trying to like make it seem as if they're doing something progressive by highlighting a woman who's a minority. So it's like, on the one hand, they're like, yeah, we have minorities, we have representation, but then if you look at what they're doing, she's being infantilized.
Didn't they use her as a mechanism for, or a carrier for a prison population on TNG though? It was like her and Data and Troy, I think. They landed on some planet, and there were some like prisoners on this planet. They're all like energy beings. Oh man.
Keiko?
Yeah, I think Keiko was part of that. No. It was O'Brien who got taken. Never mind.
I was gonna say,
and he reckoned. Yeah.
I can't imagine. There's like one time where Keiko's body gets taken over, and she becomes like evil or some shit, and she starts like the way she's evil, she stops caring about her child and shit like that. So she stops being a good mom. Man. She doesn't care, and that's what I'm like. That's the only time I actually like Keiko, when she's like, "Shut the fuck up, little shit," or some shit like. Because her kid, like, the kid was such a little like annoying brat. The way they wrote her, and the one time Keiko is actually endearing is when she's like, basically like, not giving into the kid's fucking manipulative bullshit, because the kid's a little manipulative shit, and it's just like, "I'm not daddy, you're not here all the time," and it's like, oh my god, your dad is a fucking starship chief engineer. You shouldn't be trying to gaslight him for not like being there for you, little shit. Be appreciative of everything you have. Meanwhile, these kids are fucking in Starfleet trying to act like they don't get fucking attention or something, because my dad's on shift all the time.
Well, maybe that's a reflection of Picard's Enterprise. He always hated kids. He never wanted them on the bridge, but he allowed them on the ship because he wanted his crew to have their families on board. I'm not sure how many other ships were like that, because
I think most of them.
Really?
Think if it's a scientific vessel, they have civilians on the ship. That's just something that I think it's like, because of the families. So, and they have people coming and going all
Enterprise
the time.
was an exceptionally large ship.
It was
it was the flagship.
The flagship, but it was also the flagship of the scientific vessels. So that's why it was a Galaxy class scientific vessel. It was meant for long-term, like 5-year voyages, which is why they have civilians on board. And it's like, you can't have only Starfleet on board and call it a non-military ship, is what it comes down to. So it's like, anytime there was only Starfleet on board, it's basically a military vessel. So it's
they called Discovery a science vessel, but it was very clearly a warship.
Oh yeah, and this is why there are these episodes where they allude to Discovery being, it could have been done as a way to get into the Delta Quadrant as like a cover up in the accident. So the way that Discovery was outfitted, it does look like it was a military class ship. So it like, there's a reason 7 of 9 came to that conclusion, even though it was incorrect. There's a bunch of things that make it look like, yeah, this was actually an undercover operation by Starfleet to get into the Delta Quadrant.
You know, the interesting thing about that is that, like, in the Star Trek game that I play, science vessels all have multiple deflectors, and they sacrifice like maneuverability.
Yep.
And like Voyager is the one that went to Delta Quadrant, but Voyager was an exceptionally stout and tiny ship, like almost the size of like the escort class ships, which is really surreal because it was definitely not kitted out to last. It probably wouldn't have survived the Delta Quadrant, except with less extraordinary performances of the crew. Yeah,
because then they built the Delta Flyer.
Yeah, they built an entire spaceship on a starship with no backup. Like everything about the story of Voyager is actually really crazy. It's actually the most Star Trek like series, although it's not quite as episodic as like Deep Space Nine or TNG.
Well, and there's more time travel in I guess there's a lot in TNG too, but
yeah, but they really cement the whole temporal operative thing.
Yeah, for sure. And because of that, there's a ton of stories that get wiped out, but there's a ton of extra timelines in Voyager where you're like, technically this probably still exists to a certain degree, just not in this form because Voyager altered it. Yeah. So it's like, it's out there. The Voyager, I feel like, is where the Star Trek multiverse really got cemented in. Oh yeah, like they have to have a multiverse.
Well, there are several episodes that break continuity from the actual story of Voyager. Yeah, like really have like sharp breaks in continuity, and they don't make sense. And when you're watching, you're sitting there thinking like, wait a second, this person's not dead, or wait a second, this person's dead, yeah. Or what the hell's going on? They haven't been on the show for like 3 seasons, and then
there's at least the one mirror universe with the Terrans.
Yeah, well, when they bring Kess back at one point.
Yeah,
like that stuff's all crazy.
There has to be other universes within the Star Trek universe that we just don't see that often.
Well, I think it paves the way for the whole Kelvin timeline to make sense. Because all of a sudden it's like, wait a second. Right. Yeah, it's like because they explore the whole temporal narrative on a much broader level with Voyager than we get with anything really prior, unless we consider the entirety of TNG happening within the first and last episode. Like those are just parts of the first and last episode are like part 1. And then All Good Things is the end, the reprise, and everything happens during the trial, in which case all of that happened during, 7 years, but it was really just a 3-hour trial or something like that.
I mean, it wasn't 3 hours. It was like it all played out, but I think there is... I'm trying to figure out like there's like 2 specific universes that are articulated within All Good Things. In that the way that it's at least 3.
Yeah, there's the 3. Right? There's the beginning, the middle, and the end.
There's the 3 within there, but in doing that, because of the way that like in the future, Worf was an ambassador for the Starfleet, but he rebuilt his house within the Klingon Empire. The way that I forget exactly the specific narratives, but they went far enough into the future.
Well, there's a continuity where Data is still alive.
Yeah, exactly. So that one is its own universe in which we went to the future. So I think that one is like that story that does exist, but it's a closed loop universe. Yeah. And by having the other stories in which the loops weren't closed, we've been able to go into like the tangential timelines, even though TNG is technically a closed loop story.
Yeah.
And that's where there is like, by doing that, the TNG future, well, and then they change it in the movies slightly because they go into the Nexus. So there are things about like, because Kirk got stuck in the Nexus for a while. And it's like they acknowledge that in the Nexus, the universe can be rewritten and written constantly, but it can be overwritten if the Nexus is like extended to the ends of a specific universe. So it's like the way the Nexus works, we canonically have a force within that universe that creates different timelines that are able to coexist without overlapping, but that force could also overwrite an entire universe which ends up happening in some of them. So it's like it works within itself.
Kirk was trapped in a temporal rift for 70 years.
Yep. So they have written these things in the way that the multiverse works, the different timelines work. It's able to create a closed loop story that doesn't affect another timeline. Then, like, for the temporal prime directive example, there are ways that, like, if you're within the changing time stream, you're not affected by the changes that happen in the main timeline. So you can stay in flux and not be affected, even if you're affecting the time out, like the main actual or any timeline outside of flux. So they have articulated this universe in a way that the multiverse works really well. Obviously, it doesn't work on real physics, but that's why I think they've bucked that for the sake of this force that they've written in a way that, because even then, it's not sentient, but sentient beings live within it. So then that's where they start being affected by the warp field and shit like that. So they want, Starfleet eventually caps the warp speed because it kills the beings that live in subspace. And it causes temporal rifts, like tears in space-time too.
Big bubbles of
so there's all these things that
destabilized.
They end up realizing the fabric of the universe, like I guess the multiverse in this case, is far more complex than they understand. But this is where throwing in living beings in those different, like the different levels of space, it's also kind of like the 7 levels of heaven in Taoism, where it's like the way it's described is just tuning into different frequencies ultimately in the way that Starfleet does it. But then there's like a base level frequency that the Nexus emits that changes everything in every multiverse. So that's kind of like, I don't know how much of the recent DC stuff you've read, but they have the multiverse, the omniverse, the hyperverse, and then there's like even another one. But the way that they have it described is like the omniverse is all the different multiverses, but then the hyperverse includes reality in which the reader lives. So when somebody breaks the fourth wall, they're going into the hyperverse. So they've described the different levels to start including reality in them in the DC canon itself, which is like, DC's actually always been one of the leaders in multiverse stories, but the MCU gets the credit for it in modern times with Into the Spider-Verse. But DC was actually telling multiverse stories in the, I want to say early 60s. It's either late 50s or early 60s, but I don't even think the name of the company was DC yet. Like, there's a really long history of multiverse stories. But like I said, DC is getting to a point where they're going beyond, like far beyond what we've described as the multiverse into like the omniverse and the hyperverse and shit like that. So it's like,
whoa. So in 1666, The Blazing World by Margaret Cavendish, the Duchess of Newcastle, was the first narrative involving parallel universes. It had,
it's technically also, what is it? A Yankee in King Arthur's Court could be described as a multiverse story.
Oh, sure.
Technically. So there's definitely parallel universe stories and multiverse stories that exist before DC's multiverse. But I think in the way that
I don't think anybody has read that book recently.
No,
Seriously,
definitely
like,
not.
I think,
no way. But
I think that we have to go. I don't even think we can go back that far. I think the Dark Tower is probably as far back as we can go, where it's still part of like the popular culture will be aware of it.
I mean, technically, Enoch is a multiverse story, the Book of Enoch. So it's like what's it called? The Prophet's Ascension is a multiverse story, technically. You know what I mean? There's all these ways where you could like any sort of allusion to a different plane of existence.
Okay, yeah. Well, in that case, like Narnia,
multiverse story.
Narnia
exactly.
is a multiverse story.
It is. So any sort of like Chronicles of Narnia, 100% multiverse story. It just wasn't calling itself a multiverse.
Yeah.
This is where what I'm getting at is DC articulated this notion of a multiverse in which beings can cross over between them, and the continuity still like there's different layers of continuity, and then each universe has its own level of continuity, and the multiverse has another level of continuity. So this is where it's just establishing these levels of existence as specific identified
Okay, so
pieces rather than just implication of their
in
existence.
literature, The Man Who Folded Himself in 1973 by David Gerald. It's a narrative about paradoxes caused by time travel that result in the creation of multiple universes. So this is like the first time I see multiple universes.
No, DC's multiverse definitely pre-exists that. There's no way DC.
No, this is just. I'm just saying this is 1973. I'm looking through.
Right. Well, I'm saying I'm certain DC's pre-exists that one because they had the JSA. There's like the first Crisis event happens in like the 60s and splits the DC universe, and that's where like the Justice Society into the Justice League is like the first Flashpoint event is like really, really old.
There's Flatland from like 1884 where they explore concepts of other dimensions, but that's a really, really specific, like 2-dimensional world. And H.G. Wells has a time travel story, Men Like Gods, from 1923. With it's referred to as a complete multiverse theory and para-time machine, but I don't even think that's part of the collective consciousness. Like I've never heard of that. I have not heard of that novel. I went through a H.G. Wells phase. I didn't read that book, so I must have missed something. None of these universes have been developed beyond their initial inception either. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to.
And I guess what you just alluded to is the thing. Like no real multiverse has been developed to the scale of DC's.
Yeah,
I mean
these are all like snapshots in time of someone's idea of a multiverse or a parallel universe or multiple dimensions, but these stories all end. These stories don't seem to continue.
And this is where I like, just even in the different iterations of Batman across all the different universes.
We all know that, like, what was it? Batman Ninja is a completely different Bruce Wayne than any of us have ever seen before. Because that's like the weirdest fucking Batman story.
And I mean, even then, there's like Robin in that universe is way different. Catwoman's way different. The Joker's like everybody in that universe is way different than in Earth Prime or, Earth 22 or whatever. Cause it's like, the stories they went on, like doing all the different explorations of what could happen in all the different universes to Bruce Wayne, where he almost always ended up as Batman or some sort of Bat variation, was meant to show that across all these multiverses, this person was destined to this one thing. So this is where, on the one hand, yeah, it's a comic book, but they're talking about destiny and fate and the infinite possibilities and the fates within those infinite possibilities being infinitely finite in how they play out.
Like every of everything on television or that is available on television, Stranger Things is still in production, I think, isn't it? Maybe, I don't know. I don't watch that show. Doctor Who, and Star Trek. These are the three, places where multiverse and parallel universes exist in continually developed story universe. Yeah. And then in film,
Star Trek has crossed into DC.
Yeah,
there's Star Trek exists within the DC universe.
Well, I think they exist within DC for a long time now.
Yeah.
But then, in feature films, it's like Marvel, and I don't see very many other Star Trek, but I don't see any other story universes that are continually being developed. Everything, every other story attempts to that touches into it, they have a resolution to the story, and so the universe is contained. But Star Trek and Marvel and DC, these are the places.
Oh, did you ever see what was it called? Magic? I think that was what it's called.
Magic?
I'm trying to think. Magicians, not magic. It was Magicians. Magicians was firmly a multiverse story.
Okay.
It was really good, but it was really weird. There's definitely some weird storylines in it, and it's very, very emo.
Neon Genesis
firmly
is a multiverse story.
Metaverse,
to an end.
A multiverse story. Yeah.
All these stories have an ending, though. I mean, that's the thing. There's only a few story universes that have managed to find the stamina for longevity, let alone multiverse longevity.
Yeah, they just recently came to an end, though. So it was the story, and I think part of it too is you can't let stories get stale. So ending them before it gets stale, I think is better than letting it I can't. What do people who still watch The Simpsons do? You know what I mean? I gave up The Simpsons 20 years ago, maybe.
Man, I tried to watch The Simpsons. I tried to watch The Simpsons a couple of months ago, and I got a few minutes into it, and I got up out of my chair and went and started doing something else. I just couldn't get into it.
I mean, how many times can you watch the same thing, them do the same thing, and it's there is a limit on, I think, how long things should keep running.
Well, I can't relate to
Bart
Bart
the same
anymore.
Audience, but there's a new audience for The Simpsons, so that's where I'm I get what happens, but it's who's the person that keeps watching and just 30 years in still watching The Simpsons? What the fuck kind of mental stagnation does that have to take to keep watching something? I can't watch man, some of the stuff I really like, I can't keep watching it because you just grow and the thing is trying to be the same and it doesn't grow. So you're okay, I'm going to stop watching this. I had to stop watching Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow. I'm not going to shit on the shows. They tried to stay the same and I didn't. And I just had to move on because it's not for me anymore.
See, that's why
the people who just stick with it.
That's why Krypton was so good, because the show kind of had to end.
Yeah.
And so we weren't given a chance to be disappointed with anything but the show being canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's
There's only one place that Krypton goes. They could do 50 seasons of it, but eventually you got to get to Superman.
Yeah.
And that's the only place that show goes. So it's same thing with Gotham. It's we know you're Bruce Wayne as a kid and Commissioner Gordon, or, Officer Gordon, Detective Gordon coming up. But this only goes one place. This only goes to Batman. So there's no real
suspense.
Yeah, and I
Because we
think
know that Bruce can't
there's
die.
like feigned exactly.
That's the
They
problem
can
with like prequels in general. It's like we know
Yep.
where this goes. I get it. There was a lot of lost technology and knowledge between the end of Episode 3 of Star Wars and A New Hope. I get it. There's like 20 years transpire practically that there's a lot of imperialism destroys galactic economics, and that's fine for the story. But they created such a huge and elaborate and opulent society for episodes 1, 2, and 3 that it just seemed like this doesn't seem. It seems unnatural that it swings so hard to such a sterile story environment. It was so colorful, and there were so many personalities. It just seemed like they overdid it, and I think that's the problem with a prequel, is that they've got all these ideas that they want to cram in, and then at a certain point, the story isn't about the story; it's about how much crap can they cram in, because we all know where it goes. It doesn't matter what they do as long as the people who are supposed to be alive are alive.
Well, it's really weird too because then all of the people who claim to be Star Wars fans are really just like Skywalker family fans.
Yeah.
And that's like ultimately they don't want to admit that and they don't want to acknowledge it, but it's like then they'll be like, well, they're the thing that made Star Wars. No, they're just actually a small part of that universe. And we had a window into the Skywalker family. But it's like if you really want the universe
The Skywalkers
to thrive,
were
you gotta,
tools.
Yeah.
They were all just a tiny cog in a giant machine that had been laid out long before any of them were born. It was being operated by a psychotic man who had been cloning himself for who knows how many thousands of years. We have no idea how many iterations of Palpatine had actually existed.
If they just want a Skywalker family values fucking movie, just say that, but don't shit on something because it's not about the Skywalkers. And that group. I'm
of the opinion that the Skywalkers are responsible for more pain and suffering throughout the galaxy than any other individual other than Palpatine.
Pretty much.
Like that group of that genetic line is, fuck.
Man, Luke was about to murder his own fucking nephew.
Yeah.
He was about to murder him in his fucking sleep. Let's not forget that shit. He was real close.
That's some dark shit
right there. He was
real
close. That was super dark. So, and then Matt Hamill, this is not my Luke. Yeah, it kind of was. The one that kissed his sister? Yeah. Yep. That tracks. Yep. Same Luke.
Yeah. He had no problem walking up to that sea
like
cow and milking it.
Man. Or sister kissed him, whatever, whichever. Yeah. No, like the Skywalker family is sus. Totally.
Oh man.
Totally sus.
Well, I mean, Anakin had all sorts of issues, like weird pent-up rage and anger management issues. Like, killed an entire village of people because they were slavers and they were crazy, but didn't go back and kill the flying toad dude or flying insect man that was his previous slave owner. He was nice to him. He's conflicted. He's a really conflicted character. No wonder he was never actually made a Jedi Master.
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk about unqualified. Holy shit. So, I mean, kind of loosely back to Star Trek. I think at some point I had somehow, from watching the TV series that preceded Discovery, believed that there were some kind of standards for people getting into Starfleet. And I've since been broken of this because of the show Discovery and Lower Decks. But Lower Decks is funny. And when those crew members screw up or save the day with their ineptitude, it's funny because it's a cartoon, and it's okay to see someone's leg get lopped off and then zapped back into place. That's cool. But in Discovery, when everyone's like hyper emotional and running around like a headless chicken, I wonder, like, how did these people make it to graduate from Starfleet? Clearly they have the aptitude because they can do all these things, but how were they allowed to graduate? How are they allowed to be on, of all things, the most sophisticated research vessel that existed at the time? What the fuck?
You can't have a TV show if there's no imposter syndrome. So it's like, I had the same thought last night when I was watching a Voyager episode, which was basically like a Lower Decks episode combined with Voyager. Because there's like the hypochondriac dude, and then the theoretician who doesn't actually want to test anything, and then the girl who completely doesn't have confidence in herself and second guesses everything she does. So it's like all these people got through Starfleet somehow onto a ship. All happen to be white, which is where it's like, I don't know if there's something to that in the future, but yeah, these people are unqualified getting into Starfleet. So there's definitely something there, which gets back to this notion of like, I feel like if you live in a capitalist society, you can't think outside of that frame, like as if the people Starfleet has to take are because they are restricted by the pool of people not being qualified enough. Because it's like, if all your time is spent bettering yourself in the future, basically, these people shouldn't have imposter syndrome. None of them should. Nobody should.
So, fortunately for Star Trek, they've got replicators, and so they don't actually have to cook things unless they want to. Except on Voyager, where they had to cook things because they didn't have enough replicator materials. And so it occurred to me that the biggest problem that I see isn't so much in getting like nutrient packs that keep people alive. It's that people are going to want things that taste good. And until we have replicators that actually make things come out that look and taste good, people are basically just consuming nutrient packs. I have every expectation that the Chinese space agency, whatever their NASA is, they're going to figure out a way to like have a binary agent inside of a food pouch that you puncture inside the larger pouch, shake it up a bunch, and then when you open it up 5 minutes later, like cooked stir fry comes out, and it actually tastes good. I have every expectation of this.
I have no doubt. I mean,
because our space agency and everything that I've seen on the internet about what astronauts eat, since the chili peppers toilet failure issue, they don't eat really well. These are like, scientists and people doing important shit, and they're eating like, military rations because it's hard to get shit into space. It costs a lot of money to send up like actual fresh fruit.
I mean, it's not even just that, but what are you going to do? Microwave it?
Where's that? What
are you going to do? Fucking have an open flame stove on
a spaceship,
the International Space Station. So there's not real practical ways to cook meals.
Induction, but there's still the gravity issue. How do you keep everything in the pan?
I mean, but in the sense of how do you keep the food stored, prepped for that type of environment to then be able to cook it that way? Because those two things are what are at odds in this situation. So it's like, it's not, if you get the method of cooking down, well, then you have to get the method of storing the food down so that it keeps
Yeah, so now we've got
But
to
can
now
also-
we've got to ship fresh produce and
Yeah,
ingredients into
exactly,
space on a regular
so-
basis, and that's going to be that's not going to be cheap on scale. And then there's going to be waste. There's an induction wok out there that'll cook without a flame using magnets. It gets hot as hell real fast, I'm sure. But yeah, it's like
Or are they growing them on the station? Because then, what you want astronauts fucking processing onions 2 hours a day? Was that what we want our astronauts to be doing?
no, man. There's a thing. It looks like it's like a coffee grinder for onions, and you just put the onion in, and you press a button, and it spits out about a bunch of cubes.
But even then, it's like, let's say we automate 90%. Do we really want astronauts wasting their time preparing food? Like, is that?
I don't know. I think that space chef would be a really highly valued position because astronauts
But
don't
that's
have time.
weight.
I know,
That's
but
weight.
astronauts don't have time to spend like making meals that are actually good. They have science and
Yeah,
shit to do.
and
Sciencing.
that's I don't know how long they're gonna be up there, but it's like, hey, you're up there to fucking science, not have a good experience on your palate. So I think there is this element of like, yeah, on the one hand, it'd be awesome if they had a chef up there, but they're not actually up there for fun. They're up there.
But space
like,
tourists they'll be up there for fun.
Oh, space tourists. Yeah, but that's exactly why
Yeah, so
the space tourist industry is probably not going to work because they can't get the shit down.
That's what
So
I
it's
mean. Like, if it's, I don't think. I mean, are they going to invest the money to research space cuisine, like real space cuisine?
no.
No,
No.
they're just going to send up fucking like TV dinners. They're going to send up some real fancy meal in a pouch.
And it's crazy how much actual research and development goes into astronaut food. Because I watched I think it was a Nova documentary on it where they put a lot of money into it for it to end up basically tasting like military rations.
Yeah. Yep.
At the end of the day, it just ends up they bring in all these chefs.
They get the next generation of
turns out
military
like
rations. Yeah. Good. Great. Wonderful. We made a new MRE, guys. It's the space MRE.
Yep.
Wonderful. I'm not gonna lie though. Like I've eaten the from like a military surplus ration, like when I've gone camping, like when I was a Boy Scout. And at the end of a long hike, when you don't have much energy, they don't taste bad. I'm not gonna say they taste good, but they don't taste bad. And then like a lot of like that freeze dried backpacking or camping pouch meals where you just add water or sometimes some of them you actually have to cook them, but you just add water to the main meal portion. Some of those things are very satisfying when you're out in the middle of nowhere and that's all you've got and it's basically foolproof. That's fine. But I've also managed to like stir fry like on the edge of a lake on a camping stove. And that was a really invigorating experience because I made something that tasted good out in the middle of nowhere. So it's possible. You just got to transport a bunch of fresh ingredients and have proper storage. I mean, there's no way I would have been able to transport all that stuff on my own. I had to have a vehicle to transport all of it. Good thing I
Even
wasn't
then, it's
going into
like-
space. Fuck.
I've learned. Okay, so when I worked in the produce section at O'Malley's up in Indianapolis, it's like the heating pads that we use to wrap plastic, like to heat up the produce or heat up the plastic to wrap the produce. Well, if you wrap something in foil, you can fucking cook on there too. So it's like there's ways to hack low equipment environments to cook, but it's not necessarily the best.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where if you're in a situation where you're like, okay, I'm working for like 8 hours and I don't really have time to go get some food elsewhere. Yeah, I'll make a fucking hamburger on the heating pad and it'll taste good for what it is. But it won't be the best burger I ever could make or could eat. And that's kind of where it's okay to adjust expectations based on low access environments. But I think then it's like those low access environments are low access for a reason because you're probably there to do something else. Like I was there to work fucking getting produce ready. I wasn't there to like eat a steak. So there's like,
Apparently, outer space smells like steak.
yeah,
And
which is really
raspberries.
crazy, right? Yeah.
Steak and raspberries. What the fuck?
And sometimes pennies, right?
Smells like dirty copper.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like I'm okay with, it's not even about discomfort so much as like if I'm on a plane, I don't expect the food to be 5 stars. And if it's better than just edible, I'm gonna be like, oh, this is great. Even though it's not awesome. It's not awesome inherently, but it's like when you're on a tube fucking 35, 40,000 feet in the air and you can get like a hot roll or a hot sandwich,
Man,
that shit is fucking amazing.
I'm happy just to have a
sometimes.
can of Coca-Cola to myself on an airplane.
Yeah.
Like,
But I've had some really awesome experiences in like in their non-American airlines. It's usually like Lufthansa. Lufthansa's food was always the best. Like just and then Turkish Airlines behind them for like if you're not in first class, because first class always has good food, like usually on any airline. But it's like if you're just in the cabin, fucking Lufthansa's food is actually good. Where I'm like, man, if this was like, you know, just like a $5 meal, I'd eat this shit voluntarily. I wouldn't be forced to eat some shit on Lufthansa. Whereas on American Airlines, not that airline, but any airline in America, it's like the food. They're like, oh, we're gonna give you prison food just because we have you hostage, unless you're first. And we want to do that to make the first class people feel special. You know, we could give you better food, but if we gave you good food, how would the first class people know they're special? They wouldn't know they're special.
I've had a good, I actually had a really good meal experience on Asiana. It's a Korean airline.
Of course, it's not American.
And I think the other one was, it had to have been China Airlines because it's like, you know, the national carrier of China. But they actually had like pretty decent food too. The only time I've had
Ethiopian Airlines had some really good food. I think I had goat. It was either goat or lamb or some shit. Yeah. Anytime you fly on like a airline that carries a lot of Muslim passengers, you're gonna get goat or lamb, and that shit is fucking amazing. When you're like on a flight, not in first class, and you get some goddamn lamb, it's like you can't do that shit in America. That's some shit you're never gonna experience in America. And on a flight with some fucking lamb and some actually seasoned rice and some mashed potatoes that don't taste like they just got water added to them.
Oh, I think
And you're not in first class. That shit is some shit you will never experience in America. They'll make it seem like impossible, whereas like other countries, man, like I said, because especially like if you're flying to like an Indian heavy or Muslim heavy airline, you're gonna get they're not gonna offer you beef a lot of times. They're not gonna offer you pork. So what falls in between is like chicken, fish, or lamb. So a lot of these times you'll get like a really nice chicken pasta dish or a really nice fish. Like I've had some really good fish on non-American airlines where it's like, and you look around, it's because, oh yeah, there's a ton of Muslim people on this flight. So of course they're not serving fucking bacon something or something with fucking pork in it. Or there's a bunch of Indian people on this flight. So of course they're not serving like the beef like
the beef patty thing.
Yeah, the Salisbury steak-ish thing. And that's where there's like some Hormel looking shit that you get on American flights that Americans like their taste buds aren't good enough to get anything beyond that too. And that's where I'm like, obviously the American palate is stunted, but you have Americans eating like chicken tenders all the time, or like the Americans grow up by paying for more expensive versions of the same meal. They start off eating hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and chicken tenders, and they grow up
Graduate
by
sausages.
eating the same meals, just more expensive versions. Oh, we're going out to a fancy dinner this weekend, going to get some burgers and it's like Americans eat like 5 meals, man, in various.
So we've got tacos, burgers, pizza, Red Lobster, and Steakhouse.
Oh, people still go to Red Lobster?
I mean, the last time I drove by the Red Lobster, it was full. The parking lot was actually pretty packed. People are starting to go out again, so I mean, you'll never see me in a Red Lobster again, ever, actually, but people are going out. I always thought Red Lobster was a really like crazy idea anyways. Like, why would you go get seafood in the middle of like a landlocked state?
Anybody who gets seafood and they're not near water, they deserve what they get. Period. And that's like, that's on them, man. That's on them. The issue is, though, having known commercial fishermen, like a lot of the stuff, if it's frozen, it's probably about as close to fresh as you can get landlocked, because they pretty much freeze the shit
flash
immediately.
Freeze them.
Yeah, it's like
a buddy of mine. He worked in the chiller of a commercial fishing boat for like a season, and it fucked up the nerves in his hand.
Yeah, they get real fucked up, which is why they get paid a lot.
Yeah.
But they get real fucked up on those ships.
Yeah, he said, it was so cold, and it didn't matter how many gloves you wore. Like, it was just cold, like bone chilling cold, like cold enough to flash freeze a fish.
Yeah.
So that shit's nuts. And we don't even consider like how dangerous that kind of harvesting operation really is. Those waters kill people in a matter of seconds. And they're dealing with like, heavy machinery half the time.
That's a dangerous aspect on its own. Just
heavy machinery.
Avoiding getting hit by that shit.
Yeah.
There's like a video of some dude, or he's a fisherman, where he's like looking one direction, and then something swings around and knocks him down into the fucking pit where they store the fish. And it's like, man, if it was like the other way, it would have knocked him off the boat too, which is where there's just so much like from the deck being wet and slippery while it's just rocking back and forth, to the wind, to the fucking storms. That's just got to be one of the most dangerous jobs, period. But that's when I'm like, man, the people that do that shit, that's like a whole different breed, man.
Yeah, like I'm like too high of a personal risk aversion to want to do that. That just seems like,
dude.
That
Have you seen the videos of the people that check the radio or the radio tower lights wearing? There's just some people who do the craziest jobs, where as a risk averse person, I'm like, oh my God, you do this shit voluntarily? What? You climb this fucking radio tower to check a light because somebody asked you to and nobody forced you to? Yeah, I don't get that. There's like something in my being that's like, nope.
Yeah, it seems like a really strange price to pay for, or just, I mean, it seems like a really strange thing. Like, it's part of the the whole cycle of this is how people get fresh fish, fresh with the big air quotes, frozen fish. And I mean, even though we have reality TV shows that try to expose the risk that these individuals are exposing themselves to, it doesn't change anything because people want their fish. And we can't go back to like unregulated farming of fish like there was going on 50, 60, 70 years ago, where there's just a pit full of fish, and when people want them, they just lower a boom in and pull out a giant net. And I guess that still happens. I'm sure there's still like small farm fisheries that have tilapia just packed in as tight as they can get them.
Yeah, I mean, I know farm fishing definitely, or fish farming still definitely happens. But the issue is like people want the fish to look a certain color. So then the farmers dye the fish because it's like farmed fish doesn't get the same sort of nutrients. So they don't end up looking as pink, or they don't end up looking as vibrant, and they look more gray. So to get around that, then you get dyed fish, and people have to like parse out whether, is this wild tuna, or is this actually like a farm tuna dyed that's being passed off as wild tuna? Because the wild tuna gets a higher dollar, so this
is why we can't have nice things.
Exactly. But it is increasingly difficult to parse out if what you're paying for is what is actually being described, or if it's just pretending that to get money out of you. And that's why it's really difficult to operate within this society, because it's like people are rewarded for trickery just the same as producing the high value thing. So there's not actually incentive to produce the high value thing when you can get just as wealthy by pretending it's the high value thing, and not actually getting in trouble for it. But then that's, commercial farming of animals just increasingly feels unsustainable.
Because it is.
Yeah. I mean, it always was, but I think it's more difficult to ignore the unsustainability of it. And that's where even, my mom is even eating impossible meat now, which is where I would never have thought someone of her generation, like, let alone my mom specifically, would be eating meat substitutes. Like, she doesn't always eat them, but she eats them enough where I can be like, yeah, she eats a meat substitute. And it's like, beyond just trying to be healthy, I think it's like, I've talked to my dad about it. It's like, there is something weird about needing to eat dead flesh. Like, the way that Americans frame it, you would think that they couldn't survive if something didn't die for them to eat. Like, oh, this burger has to actually be a dead cow for me to enjoy it. If it's not animal meat, it's not something I'm gonna eat because it's not real. And it's like, that mindset is so tied with colonialism, where even, my parents are like 68 and 66 or something around the age. They're able to sort of separate themselves from the notion that like something needs to die for them to eat. So like, yeah, they enjoy meat products, but they don't eat meat every meal either. There was a period where my dad was like not eating meat at all because of surgery. So it's like, they can definitely go without eating meat, and it's not part of their personalities to like have to eat meat every meal. But there's a population of Americans where it is, and then you find out they're not even eating good meat. And that's where it'd be different if you see these people that were eating T-bone, filet mignon every meal, but they're eating like 70% lean burgers, fucking indiscriminate chicken. Who knows what pieces?
Indiscriminate chicken.
just chicken pieced together. It didn't come like in a nugget. There's no nugget part of the chicken. That's just a nugget is a chicken nugget is the hot dog version of chicken.
I always have amused myself with the thought of where on the chicken the nugget grows, because it's clearly not on the breast. Is it close to the tail? Because it kind of looks like the tail. Chicken nugget is like the turkey butt of chicken parts. Because that makes sense. It's a big fatty lump of chicken. Right? I mean, chickens have butts.
Mm-hmm. How many would you have to?
How many chicken butts per nugget? Like 2, 3?
Yeah. I'm definitely, I'm starting to try to do, if I'm getting nuggets, it's going to be meat substitute, because it's, they're pretty good as far as the quality now. And it's not.
Well, it's about the texture and the breading and the sauce.
Exactly. So if those things are good, then what's inside is not irrelevant, but
it's less relevant.
It's less relevant. And now they've got the meat substitutes that they're good enough where you can't really tell that it's not actual chicken.
I mean, it's.
So I'm like, I don't need to eat a chicken nugget. I just need to eat a nugget when I feel like a nugget. It can be fucking
Couldn't you
soy
also take
whatever.
like a chicken breast or a chicken tenderloin and cut it into little cubes and bread it up and fry it? That would be like a high class nugget, right?
I mean, but I'm saying it doesn't need to be chicken.
Oh, yeah, well.
Like, and in that, like, if you take a high class piece of meat and bread it and fry it, why'd you do that to the high class piece of meat? You just fucked it up.
Because you want a chicken nugget? I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? So that's where, again, it's like there's no real high class chicken nugget, because by like proxy of covering it in oil and fucking breading, you're fucking up that piece of meat, basically fucking it up to what it could have been. So like, even croquette, it's like, it's great. It's delicious, but it's not, there's too many things overshadowing the piece of meat for that piece of meat to actually be the highlight.
No, you're right. Like you reminded me of this one time. Sheila and I went to a dinner, and we were at a Japanese restaurant that does hibachi, and so we're watching the guy do his knife and spatula routine and doing all that kind of stuff and making everyone's order. And it occurred to me that half the table had ordered their steak well done.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah.
Good God.
Oh no, it gets weirder.
Oh my God.
There was a person who ordered a salmon well done.
What?
Yeah. So this kind of,
I ordered pizzas well done. That's about it.
I mean, I want a pizza cooked properly. It's not hard. Follow the instructions. They put it on a rack. It slides through a fucking oven. It spits it out. Like, not too many toppings. That screws it up. But no, that's it's like what you were saying. People will just some people will just mess up the meat because that's what they know or that's what they want. Maybe they've had a bad maybe they've got like really serious IBS and can't handle rare meat. I don't know. I can stand, rare meats if it's not too much, but I don't want to eat like a giant ass sirloin, like a 16-ounce sirloin that's just like seared on each side.
We're not supposed to be eating 16 ounces of any meat at a time. You know what I mean? It's shit like that.
Or a 24-ounce bone-in ribeye.
Because then you see people eating like
96-ounce flank.
I ate 12 ounces of meat yesterday after not eating at all for like 24 hours ish, which is where even then that was a whole lot of meat. It was a lot. 16 ounces, and that's just one meal because I know anybody who's eating a 16-ounce steak isn't fucking fasting before that.
No,
they're not fasting. So that's one of 3 meals probably that day, if not 4. So these are people.
Your stomach was probably like, bro, hold on. Okay, now there's room.
Dude, the way calories are packed into foods these days, it's like, yeah, you can go to Wendy's and get your entire day's worth of calories in a combo meal, but then people are doing that 3 times a day. And that's where I'm like, there's some lack of awareness that goes on, because I know they put the calories up by the foods now, but Americans have just trained themselves to like ignore the calories, and they're still getting the same. They're still doing the same eating habits as if they didn't see that they're getting.
Maybe they're trying to get to 300% sodium intake.
Well, like, for example, my dad said some shit like, there's no way to control how much sodium you have in these foods these days. I'm like, yeah, you make your own food. That's how you control how much sodium. You make your own food. And he's like acting like he never thought about that shit. And it's because he knows exactly how to cook 2 things. Chili, and that was a new one recently, and burgers. He doesn't know how to cook anything besides chili or burgers. So, of course, in his head, every meal is made by someone else, because there's not even the concept of like, oh, I'm going to cook this other thing and not one of the 2 things I know how to cook.
So, let's see. Let's look at 10-piece nuggets. You would have to eat 25 boxes of 10-piece nuggets to get your daily requirements of vitamin C. And you would have to eat 10 boxes. Huh?
How many calories is in 10?
A 10-pack, 240. So 2,400 calories to get your daily requirements of vitamin C. Oh, wait, no. Vitamin C, you get 4%. Calcium, you get 2%. So you'd have to have 2%, 20. Holy shit, no, 50. What the fuck? You get no vitamin A with chicken nuggets. It's 6% of your daily requirements out of a 10-piece. Sorry, 440 calories.
Imbalanced. It's so imbalanced.
There's 440 calories in 10 chicken nuggets, so 44 calories per nugget. But 25 boxes of nuggets, 250 nuggets to get all your vitamin C from one day. And so you get 35% of your sodium from one 10-piece. So
35%. Good God. Oh my God.
You get 25% of your daily cholesterol from a 10-piece. 42% of your daily saturated fat from a 10-piece. I'm thinking that the chicken nuggets are just, that's like a little get in line for cancer pill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, wait.
Man.
So a 40-piece chicken nuggets has 165% of your total daily fat, 140% of your total daily sodium. It does have 196% of your daily protein, but you can only get 15% of your daily vitamin C. 1,700 calories, almost 1,800 calories for a 40-piece. Like,
there are people who eat these things constantly.
I've seen people eat the 40-piece and a Big Mac and large fries.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just one of their meals that day. That's just one of you think that was like all they ate that week? Nope. That's just one of probably 3 meals that day. And then they're going to go to Taco Bell at 2 a.m.
I mean,
because they're hungry.
I might do something not nearly that intense if I had just gone and been hiking for like 2 or 3 days and not eating very much, just eating enough to keep moving, to maintain energy. But like, you know, a big greasy burger at the end of some physical exertion is nice.
Well, what I've also realized is there are some people who just constantly eat. And it's like when they finish a meal, they're already thinking about what they're going to eat next. And it's not like this is not like a compulsion. This is just some people are like this where I'm like, oh, this is just a different way of existing where they live meal to meal because they're constantly hungry, but not doing. You would think these people were like Olympic athletes or some shit, but they're not actually doing anything, exerting themselves, and then they just are constantly eating. And that's where I'm like, there must be some sort of chemical trigger from finishing a meal that they're getting like addicted to, either that or the fact that they eat frequently makes it harder to deal with hunger pains. And like,
I mean, I can put away a lot of food, but in my family, we joke about, you know, on my dad's side of the family, you know, the hollow leg, packing the hollow leg. And that's like just a way to poke fun and tease somebody for like eating a lot in one sitting. But I don't always eat a lot.
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there are days when I don't have like any kind of physical activity on the board where it's like the most I'm going to be doing is walking around or maybe lift something and carry it, you know, 20 feet, 50 feet maybe. And then most of my days still spent like sitting or reading or mostly sitting. And I don't need to eat a lot on those days. On those days, I might like, you know, have a snack. And it's weird because I don't feel like I'm at some weird deficit, but then, you know, if I know I'm going to be doing something the next day, I might load up on carbohydrates, make some kind of like rice-based dish or some pasta or something.
It's good to be aware, like, yeah, different days you need different levels of intake. But acting as if like every day is the same and you need to eat the same amount of calories every day, and it's always got to be 3 meals, even if those meals are 2,000 calories a piece.
Well, you know, what's I've always found kind of remarkable is that I know some people that I've known for the last, you know, couple decades. You're part of this group, and you know, we've all managed to maintain our build essentially, and then some people, like, their metabolisms have essentially caught up with them. Is that at least that's the excuse that I hear. It's like, oh, my metabolism caught up with me, and you know, they bulk up, they like grow into their final form. And for years I was waiting, like, when am I going to grow into my final form? And it never happened. And I'm starting to just accept, like, this is my final form.
Well, whenever I hear somebody say their metabolism caught up to them, I interpret that as I did not adjust my eating to my metabolism.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's how I interpret that statement. Because people are like really hard to accept the fact that they're getting older. And it's like, yeah, guess what? I'm 38 now. I don't have the same metabolism as I did when I was fucking 16. I could eat 2 DiGiorno pizzas when I was 16, and it would not, like, you wouldn't see an ounce go on me. Yeah. I'm not 16. I can't do that shit anymore without fucking gaining like 10 pounds of water weight immediately. Yeah. So I'm not going to eat 2 DiGiorno pizzas.
Yeah. There was a time when I would eat the entire pizza and drink a 2-liter of Coke and eat a bag of breadsticks and eat something else later, like a burger later. And
not gain a pound. But guess what? We can't do that shit anymore. So
I haven't even tried to do something that stupid in a while.
I always cut myself off. I could keep eating pizza, but but I always cut myself off at 4 pieces per sitting. Like I'll never eat more than 4 pieces per sitting because my body can't handle that metabolism wise anymore. Yeah. And I know that. So it's like, yeah, even though I could physically eat more pizza, I just don't, because I know I've already had 4 pieces. So I'm not like there's no way I'm going to starve now. But the way our stomachs are set up, it's fucking stupid that we don't get a signal until 20 minutes after we're full. That's some stupid design. So this is where I'm like, obviously it wasn't intentional, but what I mean is like, our stomachs are not going to tell us when we're full. We have to be on that shit ourselves. Be like, hey, I just ingested 2,000 calories. I should probably stop. Even though my stomach is like, give me more. I'm stupid. Put more in me. Give me more. That's what our stomachs are saying after we just ate like 6 pieces of pizza. No, I need a 7-piece of pizza. Give me another pizza. And that's what our stomachs keep telling us. And then we eat another piece. And then we feel like vomiting because our stomachs are fucking stupid and the signals are slow.
Meanwhile, so the brain's like, dude, I told you not to do it. Exactly. I was trying to tell you. The brain's like,
hey, I
don't do
you.
That. Like I'm gonna cut you off from. I'm gonna cut you off from endorphins if you keep doing. Okay, I'm engaging the pain receptors. You asked for this. It's your fault. You did this to yourself.
Like, guess what? I'm gonna make you throw up now. You thought you were cute eating that 7th piece. Guess what? Now it's coming back up.
Gallbladder, you know what to do.
Yep.
Spleen, do your thing.
Yep. And then the brain comes in and checks everybody. The brain comes in and checks everybody. And repeatedly, Americans ignore that cycle. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to get 45 chicken nuggets, a Big Mac, a 2-liter soda, and a apple pie, too. Yeah.
Don't make it 2 apple pies.
I already had breakfast and lunch today, but I need a big old dinner because I worked all day at my desk. And that's like perpetually where you see people, my metabolism finally caught up to me. I can't put down those cheeseburgers the way I was able to use before. I still do it, but my metabolism caught up with me.
Hey, these suspenders are for back support.
That's how I interpret it when people say their metabolism caught up with them. Because it's like, yeah, guess what? I fit into the same shit I do when I was 13 years old because I realized my metabolism slows down and I slowed down my intake along with my metabolism.
I know when
it never caught up with me.
I know when I'm leading a life of being a little too prosperous, when my pants are starting to feel tight around the waist, it's time to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I do have, again, that's where
I feel fortunate to be able to say and to have enjoyed a t-shirt all the way from when it was brand new, when I was in high school, over 20 years ago, to watching it disintegrate into a state where I can no longer wear it. And every time I look at it, I just have all these memories of all the stupid things that I did wearing that shirt. I wonder how
I did that too. I wasn't fortunate. I worked hard as fuck not to grow out of that t-shirt or out of that jersey. Cause it's like, yeah, guess what? All these people who let their metabolism catch up to them, they fucking gave up on that shit, and that then they'll blame something else. Like, no, it's not luck when you have self-control. Self-control is not luck.
I have a pair of pants that are over 2 decades old. And I wear the shit out of them.
Yeah, that's not luck.
Yeah, that's
there's
skill.
There's an element to it where it's like, yeah, some people can't do that because their metabolisms will not allow them to. But then it's like that doesn't. There's like a locus, and there's the far end of letting oneself go, and then there's facing the age and accepting that our metabolisms slow down and then working with that, because then there's only so much. I can never be as ripped as I was when I was young, but I can still work within that means. But then I'm not going to get down on myself because I'm not as ripped as I was when I was 16 or something because I can never like. So
Your connective tissues have undergone decades of use, and they show the signs of it.
but at the same time, it's like when I was 16, I was like 135 pounds or something.
Yeah.
So it's like on the one hand, yeah, I can never be that ripped or whatever, but then I was like 2/3 of the person I am now. And it's like there's like trade-off to that. So I'd rather be the person I am now than like 2/3 of a person but skinnier. And it's like it's not easy to reframe one's mind in that way, but it's like, yeah, there's trade-offs to it. Like, yeah, you can be super skinny, but that means you're like literally 2/3 of the people walking around you.
Man, when I was like a young teenager and probably in my physical prime, like I'd eat so much to maintain, just to stay awake. You know, I don't want to go back to that. When I think about all the things that I can do now, that I can still do now, that I was interested in doing then, even almost the entire list is intact. There are a few things that I can't do anymore that I used to do when I was a young adult, like go out to a rave and dance all night. But I don't really want to do that anymore. I like wax nostalgic about it and say I miss raves. And there are parts of it that I miss, but all of those things,
the concept of them.
I like the idea of the rave. Yeah, exactly. But I can recreate an audio system in my home that shakes my entire house sufficiently that, like, short of just exposing myself to punishing decibel levels, which I wouldn't do anyways, I can get, the sweet spot of my home playback system up to punishing levels. And do I even need to do that? No. Do I want to do that? Fuck no. I want to listen to music and enjoy it. I don't want to hurt myself. So
I think what you're dancing around is, I think people miss the ignorance of not knowing what you're doing is damaging yourself long term. That's what people really miss.
I miss hurt my body.
Nostalgic. Yeah. I miss drinking 20 beers and not knowing my liver was going to fail.
Oh, take that, liver. Take that. You bastard. I'll show you.
Because it's like, man, it's not even about like alcohol or specific illicit drugs. Because then I'm like, I know people who do steroids and were like not thinking about the long-term effects of that shit, where you're like, okay, it's fine to be ripped now, but what happens when your ball sack is empty because your fucking testosterone is completely depleted, and now you literally have no nuts because you took steroids?
Well, and what part of steroids is fun?
None of it. Just the idea of it, that is what they think they will get from it is what they want. It's an idea that they're attracted to, and that shit ain't real. So that's why none of that is actually fun. When you find people who are actually doing it, they're usually miserable fucking people because they're not in a place where they're actually having fun.
I mean, I'm not advocating drug use at all, but I'm just saying, like, drugs should be fun.
Right.
You should enjoy yourself doing drugs.
Yeah, if it is fun, I am advocating for it. Hell yeah, I am.
If it's fun,
I'm on the opposite. Like, if it is fun and it's not destroying your life, fucking do it. But if it starts destroying your life, that's when people need to stop.
Yeah, I'm like anti-advocating drugs that aren't fun.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's morally great. That's a fucking awesome stance. If it's fun and it's not destroying your life, do it.
Yeah. If it's not harming anyone or anyone else, what's the problem? But if it renders someone's balls to shrink, like, really? Like, what?
Yeah. No, man. That's why that culture faded away into nothing, because nobody was actually having fun. And that shit has a short shelf life.
Oh, man. Yeah, if the price is like you lose your balls.
Mm-hmm.
Exceptional radio. Exceptional radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Set course for Earth. Engage base drive. Digital modulation of genetic code commence.